we've got just a few minutes with you,
Sure.
right?
No, I mean, as long as we
to
need.
chat with you. Okay.
I'm here, excited, humbled, honored, always. We have a long time relationship. And every time we catch up, it seems we think about where we started, where you started, where I started, where we've overlapped over the years.
So let's start with where we as an organization started together, because today marks November 21st is the start of Maidan, the Revolution of Dignity. And Razom as an organization was born on Maidan, in Kyiv, in Lviv, in Odessa, in New York, in Washington, but really on Facebook. And so I want to acknowledge one of the co-founders who's here, Ola Yerchkiewska,
I saw her.
who I'm going to call on later on. But from those very first days in 2013, you and Veselka were literally fueling the people who made Maidan in New York. And so thank you for that.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I mean, that's who I am and who we are, and we've been doing it as we celebrate 70 years at Veselka this year. My grandfather was a very big believer in seeing a free and democratic Ukraine, and any battles or fights or fight for freedom is who we are, and we will continue to support groups like yourself.
And you mark November as your sort of birthday month.
So 20 years ago, when we came to celebrate our 50th anniversary, we did some research and we noticed it was sometime in early November that Veselka began to operate as a business. This year we were looking at dates and we wanted to avoid the election season. So last week we technically celebrated our 70th on the 12th of November. And we had a campaign that we did, a special menu that was reflective of 1954 prices. We weren't offering 1954 prices. I wouldn't be able to survive, but we had a special set menu for $19.54 that included compote and varenyky and medovik, and we had a great turnout from that. So
that's so cool.
But it was
70 years though. That's kind of impressive. You guys come take seats. Mr. Ambassador. Okay, we're going to talk I want us to talk about a few different things. Sort of Veselka and the Razom and our work together, and then I also want to talk about the film a little bit as we lead into it. But so you and your family have been at this for 70 years. For the past 11 years, and in all of those ways, but really most in a very striking way since sort of post-COVID full-scale invasion, you've been like a front door to Ukraine in New York. And I say that with all respect to the ambassador from Ukraine to the United Nations, Ambassador Kisletsa, who's here. Perhaps the formal international front door, but from a New York City Big Apple scrappy, it's like you guys. And I'll never forget how many times people came to you with contributions that you then took upstairs to the Razom little office in the East Village. And we see some of that in the film, but I just want to acknowledge sort of you as this carrier and representative of Ukraine, and talk a little bit about you as what have you done at the business over the past 2 years to grow that?
Because I think of where we're located and what the East Village and what was referred to as Little Ukraine of New York, and where Veselka is located, we're kind of a focal point of where Ukrainians migrated here in the early waves in the 1940s and 50s. My grandfather being a founding member of the New York chapter of Plost, who's my landlord currently, has been and always will be. indefinitely. They have to, their charter commits that they have to have a New York office, so I don't foresee them leaving that location. During multiple crises that have happened in Ukraine, news agencies have sought out a New York story. Obviously, there's many avenues, whether it's through the ambassador or the UN, on a more of a political point, but when there comes to the personal story about Ukrainians in New York, they've somehow come to Veselka. Maybe it's because we're the oldest Ukrainian American establishment in New York. I think there are others maybe in Brighton or in Brooklyn, but nothing that has as much history or legacy as we do. The news medias came, I've been quoted from Al Jazeera to South China Sun, trying to get a comment from Ukrainians working or living in New York. And honestly, a lot of, as we know, besides maybe ourselves and people in this room, Ukrainians are pretty soft-spoken or don't really share a lot, especially during these times. And I was kind of thrusted into a position of being the voice for them. It was something new for me. I'm not a big speaker of sorts, but I learned that through my staff and how their feelings were, and organizations like yourself, knowing that we have a group where Ukrainians are resilient and strong, and that voice needed to be sounded. So over time, I think I mumbled a few interviews, but I think now over time, we continue to resonate as a group, as a community, that we will win this battle.
And you've expanded physically the business.
So that's another whole, I've been very humbled and grateful for the success I've had at Second Avenue. I'm third generation. My father married into the family, ran it for 50 years, 54 years technically, and retired right when COVID hit. I really had a lot of reservations after COVID. A lot of restaurants hospitality industry took a major hit here in the city. But my father had always stressed about paying attention to the details, and with government help, the PPP money and the ERTC, but honestly, it's people like yourself and the Ukrainian community that continued to support me during those hard times. And when I reopened, I reopened with resounding, approval or just thankfulness for the people that realized that I'm so glad you survived, and it's a feel-good story. And then the result of the conflict has brought a much larger attention to Ukrainian cuisine, I think more so, than 20 years ago. I mean, obviously the Maidan and the first, in 2014, the first invasion, people had inquired, but definitely this major invasion in 2022 has opened up a lot of ideas, or people's seeking out Ukrainians and Ukrainian cuisine and businesses that are supporting what's happening. It's just a feel-good, and it's a conscientious human nature thing to follow, to do the right thing.
So you've opened up Ukraine through food, and now in Williamsburg, a much bigger.
So I've opened up a kiosk in Grand Central, which is fast food, takeout only, and we're hedging for the future. We built a large, what they call a commissary kitchen with a retail-facing restaurant in Williamsburg, and majority of the cooking for Grand Central, Second Avenue, and for the Williamsburg location is all coming out of this brand new location that I built from scratch. I'm betting for the future. I mean, I'm hoping, or not hoping, I'm always optimistic about the future of Ukraine and Ukrainian cuisine, and I'm here to stay.
And Williamsburg is for nationwide delivery.
So I also do shipping across the country.
Okay.
So we have a nationwide shipping aspect out of that location.
And the garden.
And we just recently signed a contract to sell wholesale varenyky to Madison Square Garden to be offered in 2 stands and suites So yeah, so.
So tell all your ice hockey, basketball friends going.
I mean, and we're still
Varenyky.
staying true to who we are. Everything's handmade. Varenyky, we don't. There are other vendors or businesses that are selling varenyky, but machine made. My father had always stressed to me, and I would think any babunia who's here would tell you nothing tastes like handmade. And we are sticking to that. My staff has grown exponentially. I still have a large staff of women that make the varenyky by hand.
And now there's a lot of them in Williamsburg making the varenyky.
Everything's being done in Williamsburg, correct?
Wow.
Yeah, so
we're gone. So before we talk about the film, I just want to take a moment because full-scale invasion got us running super fast in a different way. But during COVID, you really were. I don't know who was in New York during COVID, the lockdown. Yeah, so me too. And Veselka was a sanctuary. You were doing only takeout. But I remember you and I had more than one conversation of I'd get on my bike, ride across town, kind of have this like, okay, what's happening in New York? What are we doing? How are we going to make it through this? And it's exactly that consistency of really being true to who you are in whatever crisis mode you get. And I think one of the special, I think the film is very special because it works on so many different layers. And so I guess here we can start on the layer of you happen to, the director of the film happened to start to make this film right in 2021.
We were proposed. So the initial premise of the movie was going to be something as a thank you to my father, a piece about the historical aspect of Veselka and where we are going in the future, which was unknown with all the different.
As he was ready to retire.
As he was ready to retire, COVID, the effects of COVID and all the different calamities that we've endured, Superstorm Sandy, 9/11,
the 1980s,
the 1970s. But as Ukrainians, we are resilient and we don't give up. We're hardworking, and I have a vision. I have a strong staff that are dedicated and loyal, and it's I got to always give it back to the people who continue to come to Veselka. That's what keeps us going, and I'm very grateful for that.
So wow.
But
so you started, it was like 21, right?
When
When did the film project come to you?
It came to me in November of 2021, and we were hesitant at first.
So around this time in 2021.
Yeah, sure, right.
Okay.
4 years.
The director comes to you and is like, "Hey, let's do this film."
And we were thinking of a small, short doc. It was more of a homage to my father that would spend. He's not Ukrainian. He's Ukrainian by persuasion.
By choice. Married in, we like to
yes,
say. Ukrainian
and
by choice.
he learned the language and obviously had his bumps of learning, the nuances of Ukrainian cultures and mannerisms, and he fit in. And then he invested in the neighborhood, and now he's considered the mayor of East 9th Street to a degree. So that was what the premise was, but then with the massing of the Russian troops on the border, and the news outlets coming even early on before the invasion, asking, "What do you think? What do you think?" And I've always been an optimist. I always see the glass half full, not versus half empty. And I really had thought that the sanctions that Biden had put in place would deter this, but obviously we are where we are now, and even today we're hearing the news of, ICBMs, whatever they call them. It's unfathomable to think. But when the war started, he began to capture some of what the community was going through, my staff was going through, what I was doing. And it's just a microism of what we can do as a community. And I'm very thankful for the likes of Vitaly, who's a major player in the movie. Co-star. What his thoughts are, and having different politicians and celebrities come through, and just continuing to keep.
Was it pretty easy to get used to having so many cameras around?
It was. I got to be honest. It was a little difficult at first. But Mike kind of just became a fly on the wall, and knew when to film and what not to film.
So you like captured this tectonic shift in Ukraine as seen at your restaurant, which we'll see on screen, but also the interaction with you and your dad. That's pretty intense.
I got to be honest, working in a family business, it's business first and then family second. I have a better relationship with my father now that he's out of the business and we can keep business.
It's the time apart that makes the time together so special.
But I learned a lot without having that mentorship of the years and understanding of what the difficulties that he went through, and he wanted to make sure that I understood that. I mean, one of my first projects joining the business, I was the one that was put in charge of opening overnight. So I was there every overnight for 2 years, my first 2 years out of college. And then you got to get a feel for what the village is and what it means to be responsible.
Well, and that's like the third layer of the film is the New Yorkness of it. So you being open overnight and you drove that and managed that. I mean, that's really like at a certain time, like that was that really put Veselka on the map and Ukraine on the map. But when are you going to write your memoirs of what was happening at like 3 a.m. in the East Village in '92?
I mean, the amount of things I've seen and experience, I probably could write a book. It's just a small segment here of what 1 year was like. Right. I mean, this movie ended at the 1-year anniversary, and now we're essentially going on 3 years. You know, over 1,000 days we're celebrated, or not celebrated, or we're mourned.
Yeah.
Just 2 days ago. So.
But 1,000 days, 70 years, 11 years since the start of this version of the invasion. Like, you're still making varenyky and selling borscht and growing and trying
to give back, because I think that's a very important part of who I am, and I think the partnership with Razom is important, deeply important to me. And as it's mentioned in the film, people came in droves and wanted to give checks or money, and I'm not a I sell borscht. And I made it a point that early on that I wanted to donate those sales, and were a lot of hands asking, and I wanted to be able to give back, whether it was you or World Central Kitchen. Our local St. George Parish was in desperate need because their people were dropping off, clothes and baby diapers and formula and everything that was actually employee inspired, because people wanted to come and help. David Muir did a piece about all the goods that were, American story about, what one person can do. And I really do believe in an adage I can't do this alone, but as a group, it takes a village, and we all come together. Razom.
Well, and you brought so many businesses from the East Village too, to get involved in supporting Ukraine, which is just the great, like, individual people, but also individual businesses that wanted to help out and leading by example, and that's what it takes. And so we're gonna keep doing it. I don't know if we have time for any questions. Does anyone have a burning question, or can we just watch the film? Does anyone have a burning question? I do want to give a proper shout out to Vitaly, who I've known. That's you. I've known at Veselka, but when I got to see you on the big screen, I was like, whoa, who is this guy? So I think everyone is in for a big treat. Last call for questions? No? Okay. Then I think we shift. Then I think we sort of, on this rainy day, which reminds me of some of the first time I met Dora Chomiak was on a rainy day, when she was leading a protest to support Maidan at Washington Square Arch. It was this kind of weather. And really how Razom really was created on Facebook and on squares across Ukraine and the United States, and fueled by Veselka. It's sort of appropriate that we're here, we're doing it, we're staying true to who we are, and we're going to keep doing it together. So thank you for your contribution, and thank you for taking the time to come here, but mostly thank you for being you.
Thank you.